Now, going back to a question that we have, and actually there was a comment made which is interesting from Adriana to the panelist about diet and about having your carbs earlier in the day while protein later in the day in terms of sleep. And that relates to a question here, which is what the latest studies on the best foods to improve sleep, and when would be the best time to eat them in terms of the foods. So I think that's quite an interesting one. But Alison, have you got any thoughts on that?
Basically, you're trying to avoid, probably more of the foods you're trying to avoid, but high carbohydrate foods, sugar, they dip your blood sugar, and they affect your sleep quality and the amount of deep sleep you get. The Mediterranean diet has been outlined as a good one for sleep. Restricting your calories quite significantly can have quite make it more harder to fall asleep. It can also affect your deep REM sleep, and also again, diets that are high in sugar, high in carbs, and low in fibre for 4 days were shown to lower your deep REM sleep with more awakenings. So the foods that are recommended are foods high in B6, which is fish, chickpeas, they're supposed to aid restfulness. Green leafy vegetables such as cabbage and spinach are also supposed to be good. Lycopene containing foods, which are red and orange coloured foods. Nuts got selenium in them, and bananas are also supposed to be good. So yeah, I think that was what I gleaned out of the research.
That's great. Thank you. And Sheena, I know that you've got your interest in the microbiome as well in relation, but is there anything you want to add into this?
That's right. So yeah, I mean, absolutely, the microbiome is really, really important to us, and you know, lo and behold, the more fibrous foods in your diet, the better your microbiome and the better your sleep. You know, if you get your microbiome in the right shape, a lot of things fall into place. But yes, I agree with everything Alison said, and tryptophan foods seem to have some evidence base. There's tryptophan in an awful lot of foods though, so you don't need to worry too much. Generally, if you've got a fairly varied diet, you will get tryptophan in there because it's pretty much in loads. It's in milk, it's in canned tuna, it's in turkey and chicken, it's in green veg, it's in seeds and nuts, and it's in lots of fruits. So I would imagine most people who have a varied diet would get enough tryptophan to help their sleep. And yes, the more processed your diet, the more arousal you have throughout the night, and the less deep sleep you get. And that can be a problem. And then obviously things like caffeine and alcohols are obviously, you know, the obvious ones to mention when it comes to diet. You know, keeping them into the mornings if you can. That's not ideal with the alcohol, but obviously alcohol damages your REM sleep, and caffeine isn't great for your sleep either. You obviously have problems getting off to sleep, and it's damaging for your deep sleep.
Great. And Michael, I'm just curious, from a point of view of advice with children, do you see anything, or do you talk about anything specifically relating to the foods and what they're eating? And obviously we know there's a bit of a link with diet and aspects to do with ADHD, but whether there's anything in relation to talking about this in sleep.
I think the most important thing is actually even more fundamental than that, is that so a lot of what's helping us to regulate awake and sleep is to do with that circadian body clock, and the body clock takes its cues from lots of different things. So a few people have already mentioned the importance of light, so avoiding light at night, really important. Actually, as I think a couple of people have referenced both chatting and in the chat, early morning light is actually really helpful as well in terms of getting your day started right, in terms of doing that. And light is one of the things that really helps to keep our body clock in tune every day. Our body clock constantly needs to be retuned to where we want it to be every day. But everything that we do as part of a routine is part of that. And meal structure is actually probably as important as anything. So in general terms, you never want anything to be a straitjacket. You must do this at this time and that time and this time, unless you happen to be fans of Gina Ford. But roughly, aiming to be having meals at a regular, consistent time each day as part of a regular routine, a regular rhythm, is one of the things that helps to keep your circadian clock running as well as it should do. If you are somebody who grazes irregularly at all sorts of hours into the evening and all the rest of it, then you are taking, one of the things that that's doing is taking away that strengthening cue to your normal circadian rhythm. And then, yeah, on top of that, I'm never quite, so that one of the things about sleep is some people will swear by all sorts of weird things, and they're often quite contradictory. So the classic misconception, probably, that cheese gives you nightmares, for example, and and some people say, oh, something like that helps me to sleep. So lots of people have very specific things, but things like caffeine and alcohol absolutely will impact on sleep. Caffeine lurks in all sorts of weird places. So as adults, if you've had a stressful day, you've got a bit of a stress headache, you pop 2 anadine extra at the end of the day. Well, actually, there's quite a lot of caffeine lurking in some as cofactors in many of the analgesics. So being aware that caffeine might be in places you're not expecting it to be, it can be really important. Somebody mentioned chocolate. Chocolate can have quite a lot of caffeine. I've had, there's another question in the chat about, the weirdest thing that's affected somebody's sleep. I once had a teenager that came through my clinic, and we eventually tracked her intractable sleep problem down to the fact that she was eating a bar of Toblerone before bed. And as soon as she cut the Toblerone out, then suddenly massively she was able to sleep a lot better. And I think that was probably, at least partly, the fact that there's quite a lot of caffeine lurking in there. So things like that are important. But yeah, I think with meals, it's often the structure that's key. The other really simple thing is don't go to bed with just having eaten a massive heavy meal, but equally don't go to bed hungry. And we often find that for people who are waking up in the middle of the night hungry, well, a well-timed carbohydrate snack an hour or so before bed is actually probably going to help you surf through the night. But yeah, the structure is often the most important thing that we focus on rather than specific pro foods anyway.
I'm fascinated actually to ask, how did you discover the girl's interest in the Toblerone?
Oh, it came up in the history eventually. I was kind of saying, well, what are you doing before you go to bed? Tell me your routine in exhaustive detail. And she went, and then I had my Toblerone, and then I brushed my teeth. And I was going, wait, now what? And she had an obsession. Anyway, there you go.
Great, thank you.
Importance of a thorough history.
Yeah, absolutely.